Jennifer Flores, and I'm a mixed media artist. Um, I have been painting and sewing and just kind of combining a lot of different materials together to uh, make my art, find a voice for it, and it works really well with Pam because we both kind of have found that same passion of using materials in unusual ways.
My name is Pam Shanley, and I work at the Arlington Center for the Arts. And I think of myself as somebody who draws and paints primarily, and yet I do a lot of mixed media too. I, for some reason, really wanted to really do something in response to this show because the League of Women Voters and women getting the vote, and that for me just, I mean, this was way back in the summer. But for some reason that really drew me, and normally I don't really get that excited about calls. I'm like, oh yeah, I really should do that. But this one was sort of like a driving force for me. But I also knew that I couldn't develop the visual that I had in my head. Like I couldn't somehow gel those ideas until I talked to Jenny, and then Jen threw some new balls into the game, and suddenly we started sparking and then figured it out. So I dragged her in. So there you go.
Yeah, and it wasn't a reluctant drag. When Pam came to me with, what the project was all about and what she wanted, I was just drawing like crazy, different ideas that I thought would work. We had some very ambitious ideas that hopefully maybe later on down the road that would, be something that we can work on. But it was just really exciting to come up with this idea, to work with this idea rather. And then also for me, once I started to do the research, you start to realize how many building blocks there are to get to this point. And we have, only an inkling of understanding of what they went through. We know what we go through and everything. And it just became something that we also have lived, Rosa Parks and, her journey and how significant that is to all of us. And also how it, with all of the things that are going on all the time, not just what's hitting the news now, but what's going on all the time, and what we see, how important it is that we respect and continue, with, this idea that we're not there yet. We maybe have been able to achieve certain pivotal points in our lives, but that's not for everybody. And so this dress was something that really made a statement, I think, for all of us, because we all know that history and we all grew up with that history. So.
And the nice thing about the dress that we came up with was the dress is kind of elegant and almost ethereal. When you see it, especially when the light, when it moves, it kind of moves on its own, when just a little bit of air moves it, and it casts these wonderful shadows on the wall that are very three-dimensional. And it's almost like the spirit of the movement somehow. It just sort of moves on its own, and it keeps moving. And women's rights aren't a given, as we are finding out right now, that everything we thought we had in the pocket could be taken away from us like that. And so the fight never ends. You have to keep, and not just for women, but for all humanity. Like, there's no reason why we can't treat each other with decency and respect, and not just people, but the creatures, the earth. Like, we're all part of this. Why can't we all just treat each other with respect? And so that dress, to me, it's elegant, it's ethereal, and yet it's as strong as iron, which those silent sentinels, they were strong. They might have been silenced, but you bet your boots they were not going to be messed with. So that's
Or
sort of what the
stopped.
dress meant for us.
Yeah, or stopped.
Or stopped.
Yes. What I have always found in my process is when I screw something up, I cover it up. And so, all the little fancy details and everything, this was not easy material to work with. It was heavy duty, iron-on interfacing. And of course, it wasn't ironed or anything, but it was thick, and it was meant to give it body. Well, that also created problems on trying to keep it fluid and soft and everything. So as we were collaging, things got stiffer. Things, the whole material approach had to change. So it just kept evolving. And, I think again, as Pam had put down a lot of the collage pieces, and then I would follow her lead, anything that I thought needed to have, a softer edge to it, or a different type of finish, then I would just come in with the glue gun and finish it off that way, because at that point, I couldn't sew it. The material was, practically like, it was just too difficult for any machine to be able to go through. So, I think, but for both of us, watching each other work, once we could see where it was going, we could, again, respect that the back part of the dress where there was no way that I could do, some sort of decorative sewing stitch on it. You came up with the idea, Pam, of doing, the kind of the diagonal on just under the, well, at any rate, the diagonal.
It's like a fan. It's like a fan.
The fan. So, that was something that, I mean, when you see it in the photograph, it looks exquisite, and it also looks horrifying too because of the shapes. And that was something we never expected. Once we started taking pictures, it was like, that was when you could really feel that it had evolved and had that ethereal feel to it, that there were, it just totally changed. It wasn't just a dress that we were slapping things onto it, trying to get it done for the deadline. We really did, stop, look, make that next critical decision. But, we also had a hell of a lot of fun just, trying to get to that deadline, and we did. We hadn't worked together in a while doing something like this, and both our artistic process is different, and so we came to terms with it in a really cool way, and most of it was because we're both inarticulate at times. And so, it would be something like, no, let's do this, let's do that. So a lot of it was trial and error, but I think it really had to do with the trust that we had with each other, that we would find a way. We didn't have to agree. And we all both came to the respect that we could trust each other. And that also, I think, helped both of us to be able to come out of ourselves. You get driven in one direction, and a collaboration, when you allow yourself to be taken in with somebody else's vision and to try and find ways to merge that you find that you've learned something new. You don't have to stay in that box. And I feel that was one of the most exciting things and invigorating things that happened. But yeah, there were a lot of antics because we're both, we were slapping things slapping things down and experimenting and throwing things away, and then Pam was retrieving them and putting them back. And so
Oh, you can't throw that out. That's a really good piece.
so
We
you
would
know
use
it had it had a lot of just really interesting different ways that we approached it. But I think, we both felt very strongly with the research that we did on the on Rosa Parks as well as Alice Paul, and where they stood in history. And, that really propelled us, with what we thought would be a contemporary statement also today.
But we had so many to choose from, right? And this
Yes.
is, I had a whole ton, and this is where Jen was really helpful. And I had all like, oh, everything. It was started off with the suffrage movement, and then I went all the way up to the civil rights era. And Jen helped me to weed it out. And she's like, well, how about, Alice Paul and Rosa Parks, even though they were in different time slots and had different fights. One was civil rights and one was just getting the right to vote. And they were very different people. And yet the thing that they had in common was they weren't just about women getting the vote. Wasn't just about getting civil rights for one class of people. It was about lifting all humanity up and like justice and equal rights for everybody, irregardless of what you looked like, or what your sex was, or who you loved, or anything else. It was just this general kind of wrapping their arms around all humanity and lifting it up. And that, I think the universal, Jenny, you would tell me what you think, but it was the universal themes that both Alice Paul and Rosa kind of expressed, especially in the statements that we ended up choosing.
Yeah.
That really drew on that.
I think also what was interesting as, we started to do some of the research on it, to find somebody, like Alice Paul, who was in a certain class and society, and to be as open-minded as what she was. And that didn't mean that everybody in the movement thought the same way, but they thought enough about where this was going to go. So it wasn't just like now. There isn't a perfect philosophy. It changes, and also it's a matter of acceptance that these women who came into the movement, especially later on, with a different background, and they were actually working, women and everything, that they were able to come into this movement and have a voice. And it was really kind of the start of it. It wasn't perfect. There were a lot of barriers, racial, sexual, social, that, always get brought up in history or overlooked. But those were there, and yet it has kept churning over all these decades. And one of the things that Pam and I had talked about is it's always going to be that way. It's never going to be set. It's always going to change with every single generation, and what the social needs are, what the economic and political climate is. Everything is going to kind of raise the bar or open new doors. So
Evolve. It'll keep evolving.
it will, yeah.